Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video, and today we're gonna do an oscilloscope video. So, right here is the GTX 780 I Can't Be Bothered edition set up on, well, on the Z77 M-Power, because that's just the board I've been messing with lately. But the focus really is on the graphics card. Now, this card, I've built it a while ago, and actually also already did a few videos messing with it. But I have recently also made a new oscilloscope probe, which you can see right here. That's this wire going to the back of the card. And I have also done a new modification to this card, which I made a separate video about. You can kind of see it down here, those two wires, one green one white one, not this green one, that green one. Basically, it allows the card to have forward voltage sense, which means that the VRM controller on this e-power no longer takes the voltage at the output of the VRM here as a reference, but the voltage that's actually getting to the GPU core, which makes it... Theoretically, it can improve voltage regulation quality, but as you're going to see, it's still not great because if you want to really know why the voltage regulation on this card is so horrible, it's 100% my fault, and it's not named the I Can't Be Bothered edition without a reason. This card is horrible, which is why I use this one to test this mod on. But, you know, technically that mod can improve voltage regulation. What it's really about is that we get rid of that very typical of an e-power voltage drop from idle to load. Because when the e-power only sees the voltage at the e-power output, well, it can't compensate for the resistance and inductance of the connections and power plane that come after it. So, you know, when you start pulling a bunch of current, well, that goes through that resistance and bye-bye voltage. So, on this card, it was especially bad because the connection's also bad on this one. That I was dropping 150, sometimes 250 millivolts from idle to load, because the voltage at the e-power stayed the same, but the voltage that actually got to the core, well, that one dropped off a cliff. And yeah, so that mod gets rid of that, and I thought, well, I really want to show this thing running, but doing it all in one video, I also gonna explain and show off the mod. It's a bit too long, so I am making this video instead. So let's go here, and here you can see the oscilloscope. That's my Rigel DS 1054Z, using my 1X probe, which I also made a video about. And yeah, so this is the V-core rail. We are probing directly behind the core, so very close to where the actual voltage reference is being made by the e-power now as well. And we're gonna run a bunch of different loads. So right now in idle, it's not doing much. We clear the statistics. VPP is very low. Not much is going on right now. So let's start a load just do the GPU-Z render test, because that one makes a very nice looking transient. Nice looking on this card at least. Also I know most of the screen is covered, it's not really that important to see what's on the screen. The important bit is this. And yeah, so that's render test running, and if we bring up our trigger a bit, we can zoom in, and this is the typical reminiscent of GPU-Z render test transient that we've also already seen on GTX 400 and 500 series cards. Kepler does this too, where there's a bunch of smaller transients first, then there's a pause, and then there's a big transient. This is what render test just kind of looks. This is what render test does. It doesn't do this on all the cards. It does it on specifically NVIDIA's, and specifically these older NVIDIA's 700 series. Fermi does it. Now I know Kepler does it too. I'm not too sure if Maxwell does it. But yeah, so the thing you can see is if you take a look at the average. Right now it's at 1.18 volts, and we're drawing about 300 watts from the wall, I don't know how much of that is the card, unfortunately. Well, I could just look at the PMD. Because all the core power is actually going through the E-power, and that's saying 220 watts. So, yeah, so we're dropping about 20 millivolts at drawing at 220 watts. Well, actually only like, yeah, we're like right about the border between 1.19 and 1.2 at idle. And, well, you know, idle at this voltage and then load, like, it barely drops. And that is really what the mod is all about. Like, before it was like, alright, now, at 1.2 idle, I would not be able to run the card without the mod, because the low voltage would, like, drop way below 1 volt, and that's not enough to run this card. Like, Kepler card's stock voltage, like, you can see it right here, because the card still thinks it's, you know... this is the vid that the card wants, and you can see it's, like, high 1.1, like, close to 1.2 volts. So, like, pretty much exactly what it's getting, actually. Like, at least the average. The minimums, as you can see, are very bad, which is my fault. The reason why this transient is so spiky, that's my fault, because the connections on this E-power are awful. Now, if you run something more interesting, like Firestrike, you're gonna see some more interesting transients. Like, specifically, Kepler in general, on an oscilloscope is a mess. Like, I haven't spent a lot of time yet probing Kepler cards with an oscilloscope while they're running, but I have seen some results both from myself and also other people who stabbed Kepler cards with oscilloscopes. And it's just that they have these, like, massive, just super zigzaggy transients in like, heavy 3D loads like Firestrike. And this card specifically is super bad because, well, again, the Z-power job right here. But even there, you will see it's not gonna drop it that much, because it's actually, like, compensating the voltage that's, like, behind the core. So you set 1.2 volts using the potentiometer here at idle, and it will drop a bit because load line still exists, but it's gonna try to actually keep that 1.2 volts ish happening. Yeah, and so these are the transients that you get in heavier loads, and, like, if we zoom out, you can somewhat see how it's, like, periodic. But yeah, so this is what Kepler looks like under a heavy 3D load. Minimums are, the minimums are what the minimums are. Also, that there's, like, a whole bunch of overshoot. It's, like, going to 1.3 volts. Like, it's overshooting by more than 100 millivolts, and BPP is also, I also seen better days. Like, idle, everything looks fine. This is fine in idle. But, as soon as we, like, run anything on the card, it becomes just so super bad. Yeah. Just, I don't know, I don't think it picks up the sound, but there is quite a lot of coil whine, which I didn't actually pick up before I put the mod on the card, which is interesting, but I mean, it kind of makes sense if it was just keeping the same voltage at the output. You know, like the power plane in the real world, yeah, it has resistance, but also has inductance and some capacitance, and that smooths out the transitions. So it makes sense that there would be less coil whine if you don't have forward voltage sense. But yeah, this is kind of horrible. Like, there you can see that's like 3 frames. Yeah, so it is pretty bad. It is pretty bad. Like, got an okay score at least. Well, actually, it's not that great of a score. It's not that great. Also, the clocks are kind of low. But yeah, that's Firestrike. What I want to know is what Tropics looks like. Oh. Did I just press start? Without... Okay. Yeah, so it runs at much higher FPS, which means that we have shorter frame render cycles, but you can... if I get the trigger a bit more set up. Like... It is if we clear statistics, that is a lot of VPP. Like that is a lot of VPP, and like a fair amount of it is overshoot, but those minimums, that's over 100 millivolts of undershoot as well, and that is frankly not acceptable. Like I would, if this is a card that I care, like if this was a card I would care about, this would be completely unacceptable. Like over 100 millivolts undershoot is, I would try to avoid that. Like you can't always avoid it if you have something that just draws a lot of power. Kind of like this, like the 780s can get very power hungry, but like we're running just like 1.17 volts, so it's not, it's all right. But we're drawing like 400 watts right now from the wall. But yeah, like if you have a part that draws less than 300 watts and it has more than 100 millivolts of undershoot, I would not call that acceptable. That is, especially on a graphics card. Like, I would just no. Like CPUs could be different. I oscoped one single CPU, and it was in a spot where there was like no transients. Like I put a probe point on the backside of the socket from this motherboard, and you would see like 30 millivolts peak to peak under load in Prime 95. Like, whatever's going on this motherboard, you cannot see it from the backside of the socket. And yeah, I mean, I do wanna like capture a single transient and just like, that is just a cliff. That is a cliff. Even if I zoom in like super far, that is just a cliff. This is like a really good representation of what it looks like when your e-power has shitty connections and even shittier output filtering. You're doing some things, like your voltage is, it's alright, and then a heavy load hits and your voltage just boom, down it goes. And then it does the thing, and then the load release happens, and it just shoots right back up, like way too high. Well, actually, this overshoot isn't too bad, but like you can see how it goes like above the average voltage, and then I guess another load hits and it goes down a little bit again. Like, just in general, this is a total mess. Like, as I said already, like Kepler cards seem to be a bit messy like this. Like, this is way more messy than, for example, Fermi is. Like, yeah. Which could be just because of how Kepler is made. It could just be an architectural thing. It could be something with like GPU boost, how it's like micro throttling or whatever, though it really shouldn't be doing that with an e-power. And it's like not, it's not firmly limited, it has a water cooler on it. But yeah, like this is just a total mess. I do want to scope a good Kepler, like, what could I scope? Like a 780 Ti Matrix, 780 Ti Classified. I want to scope my E-powered 780 Ti as well, because that one clocks really well. But I do actually wonder, like, if it's, because it's E-powered, like E-powering a thing that draws a lot of current, especially on an architecture that seems to be like messy like this. Yeah, like, I want to scope that card. There's a lot of cards that I want to scope. And I do have the time now. Like, my uni semester's over now for, like, the last week. And I have until October to, like, I'm just on vacation. Like, I'm not gonna be home the entire time. I'm gonna use the time to, like, actually go places. But I do have time to scope a lot of things. And I will do that. But yeah. This is a total mess. This is a mess. Like, there is, like, you have to zoom out really far. Like, this is very clearly periodic. Like, you can see that that's like a complete frame render cycle. But like yeah, like here you can still kind of see it, but you go to here and it's just like, all I see is just a mess. This is a mess. And it's, yeah, this is like, Like, just judging from the VPP, that's like GTX 480 reference VRM levels. And, well, this is running on an 8 phase with way more capacitance. But, like, it's still on the same level because the connections are just that bad. Yeah, I don't actually remember what the reference for ADVRM is like for the minimums. I think it's slightly better because I think it had about the same minimums, but at a lower average. But yeah, like this is. Oh, and that's what the several thousand FPS on the loading screen look like. Nice. Yeah, I do wanna run GPU Pi. I actually don't think I've ever scoped GPU Pi yet, so I'm actually interested in seeing what it's gonna do. Where's GPU Pi? There it is. Oh, good. Okay, we need to reboot. Yeah, I don't know what GPU Pi is gonna look like, cause it's like generally a fairly light test. Like it's just calculating pi. And usually you can, like, it's usually lower power, and you can usually also run very high clocks. So I do wonder what it's gonna look like. I guess it's gonna be closer to GPU-Z render test than Firestrike and Tropics are. Well, I don't know. Like, there's also cards where GPU Pi is very heavy for some reason. Like, I have a GTX 570 that draws more on GPU Pi in... that draws, like, more power in GPU Pi than it does in Firestrike, and that's just weird. Okay, wait. That's, like, nothing. What? That's actually like nothing. Like, that's like even tamer than render test. That's actually surprising, like how just, yeah. I guess if we only run this, then the voltage regulation isn't actually too bad. Just don't ever run a different test than this. I was actually not expecting that. That was like nothing. That was like loading a test, not running one. Okay. Huh. What happens if it... I wonder if it looks different if I use OpenCL instead of CUDA. No. No, it's just like if I a single one, just it still is a cliff. Like it still is a cliff, but like the load release is like very smooth actually. There's just no overshoot. That's just the load happens, voltage dips a bit, and then load releases, and it just steadily goes back up. That is surprising. Like, yeah. I mean, you can directly see why you can run higher clocks on GPU Pi then, because, like, look at those minimums. Those are, like, 100 millivolts better. So, you like, it's, like, basically as if you overvolted this thing by 0.1 volts by just running GPU Pi. So, like, that's one of the reasons why you can run extra clocks. Like, the other reasons, of course, like, it's just not a very heavy test, so you can run something that's horribly unstable. Because, like, it's just not heavy enough to really stress the card to show instability. So, like, that is interesting. Like, on at least on Kepler, this is like nothing. This is basically idling the card. Like, I want to bring render test back up. That was, like, way more pronounced. Like, way more obvious that something's actually happening. Like this. Like, I can bring the trigger way down. Like, that's render test. And that's usually used as, like, a basic just, like, oh, does it, like, barely function? And this is, like, several degrees worse than GPU Pi. Like, I knew GPU Pi was light, but I did not know that. Interesting. So I do wonder if there's anything left that we could run, because, like, I mean, is there anything interesting to run that would, like, look different? Is what I wonder. Also, the video is already 20 minutes long. Because, like, we have heavy 3D load, we have medium 3D load, and now we have GPU Pi. And I mean, the overall impression is that this is a pretty bad card, like, in terms of voltage regulation. It actually, like, in terms of overclocking, it's, like, actually not too bad. Like, if you just take the average voltage you set and the clocks it's gonna pass Firestrike at, this is actually, like, an about average to slightly above average 780, because it does, like, high 1300s on the core at, like, 1.3 volts, which is about the same that I managed on my 780 Jetstream, which is a custom PCB with an 8-phase that's not tacked on like this one. And yeah, so I guess we have done everything, though. Like, bunch of oscilloscope shots, and yeah, so go back to this view for the final rant that's hopefully short. Like, that was the 780 I Can't Be Bothered edition on the oscilloscope, while also demonstrating that, you know, you put a load on it and voltage no longer drops off. I mean, it still drops off when a transient happens, but, like, your average stays roughly the same, which is the point of the forward voltage sense mod. So, shown that working. Also ticked off one of the cards that I thought was, like, interesting to look at an oscilloscope, only if for this one it was only morbid curiosity as to how shit you can make something. Well, I guess I could have, like, not added the capacitors to the back of this. There are some caps, like, on the back, you can kind of see one there. I could have not added those. That would have made it even worse. But quite frankly, this is still pretty bad. So yeah. So I'm gonna go find other cards that I find interesting to, like, maybe look at with an oscilloscope. And until then, that's gonna be this video. And until next time, goodbye.